Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. In the wake of the Supreme Court's decision in Louisiana versus Callais, which essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act, several Republican-controlled southern states didn't waste any time in calling for special sessions to erase districts and redraw maps. One of those states is Tennessee, where Republicans are trying to eliminate the state's only majority Black congressional district only months before the 2026 midterms. Gloria Johnson is a Democratic state representative who has been a powerful voice in the state, speaking out against what she calls a white power grab. Representative Johnson, we really appreciate you taking the time to tell us what's going on in Tennessee.
Absolutely. I appreciate you all talking about it because this is just Jim Crow with a Sharpie. That's what this is. It's not only about a congressional seat. They're robbing working families of Tennessee of their basic democratic rights and their ability to meaningfully participate in the decisions that govern their lives.
Absolutely. Well, I know last week you had a special session and the NAACP has already gone to court filing an emergency petition to block the map that passed. Can you catch us up on where things stand today?
Well, we're waiting today waiting on injunctive relief, just to see what happens. I think there are multiple suits, though, because I think some congressional candidates have lawsuits as well. And so we're kind of in a holding pattern because the crazy thing about this is, there were already folks running for Congress. Their campaigns were up. They'd already been spending money. And all of a sudden, they changed the lines in the middle of an election. And I don't think everybody understands that we already had people running in what they thought was their district. And so this has all been upended. Really what they had was the ability, they had a couple of days where they had time, they're going to have to reprint ballots. They're going to have to reprogram machines. They're going to have to open the filing deadline so people can file now in these new districts. It is outrageous, unprecedented, and that's what it was. It was a power grab by an authoritarian government that wants to control everything that happens and wants to maintain their power.
So, Representative, we were watching from the outside. Many people are watching across the country what was happening at the Tennessee State House. You were there. You were in the room. Can you talk to us about what it was like during the special session?
It was, I liken it to I said to someone, I felt like I was in a Klan meeting for 3 days. And that really is what it felt like. Some people, well, how do you know what a Klan meeting feels like? Well, guess what? I read books. We know a lot about what those things look like. And as a matter of fact, when I was a young child in Mississippi, we had the KKK blew up a Jewish synagogue a mile from my house. My father was in the FBI. He and his partner went and arrested the 3 main perpetrators of that bombing. And then the Klan threatened to kill my family. And so we had to move out of our home for a few weeks while they rounded up the rest of the folks. So trust me, I know a little bit about the Klan, how they operate, about white supremacists. And that's what I was seeing on that House floor. And one of the interesting things about it is they have no shame. Used to be people were a little embarrassed and the Klan wore caps and they wore their hoods and their sheets. These folks aren't interested in hiding because we have a president at the top in this authoritarian movement who is a proud racist and doesn't feel that they should hide it.
I know, Representative, you had a very memorable floor speech, and we have part of that. So let's go ahead and play that now.
We do not have to be here. We're costing our counties a fortune. We are making a mockery of this body and of this state. We are the shame of the nation and the shame of this state. We are here to take away the voices of black voters and the people of Memphis to crack their districts and dilute their voices. You should be ashamed, but guess what? I know that you're not. This is not a special session. This is a white power rally and a white power grab. That is what this is. And you can deny it all you want, but the people in this state know better. They don't want partisan gerrymandering. They don't want gerrymandering by race. They don't want any of it. We have the ability to have independent redistricting.
So one thing that struck me was how prepared it seemed that Republicans in Tennessee and Alabama and other states were for this ruling from the Supreme Court. They seem to have the maps ready to go. You're on the inside. Talk to us about what you're seeing and what you're hearing from your colleagues.
Yeah, I certainly feel like they had those maps for a while, but the funny thing was we didn't get them till an hour or two before the first vote. You know, they kept that close and kept those for themselves. And so that's one of the things that's so frustrating. Normally when we redistrict between reapportionments, you know, between the census, there's a public comment time. There is time in the last redistricting, people and community groups were able to submit their own maps of what they thought it should look like. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand that was really the most diabolical thing that happened was that Tennessee, for more than 50 years, has a law in place that says we cannot redraw the lines between census apportionments. We had to repeal that law. That was the first bill we passed, was the bill to repeal that law so that we could do this lawless gerrymander. And just a couple of years ago, the courts had deemed that district as legal because it was drawn as that was enough people. It was drawn by population in a like community. It was one county that had the population to be a Senate district. That's a natural way to draw lines and boundaries.
Now, I know that this is not the first time that the Tennessee legislature has made national news. And you were part of what was known as the Tennessee Three a few years ago. You and two other representatives were calling for gun reform after a tragic mass shooting. Once again, your Republican colleagues were trying to silence you. Talk to us about what it's like to be a member of the Tennessee House when you have the majority that takes such drastic actions to not even let the minority speak about crucial issues facing your constituents.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing to talk about because when I first got to the legislature, I was first elected in 2012 and started serving in 2013. And the interesting thing was it was a Republican supermajority at the time. We had a woman speaker, it was Beth Harwell. And one thing that I could say when Beth Harwell was the speaker of the supermajority of Republicans, I was always called on when I raised my hand, and I never got my microphone cut. Beth Harwell respected the democratic process. She didn't mind debating bills and issues. But since Speaker Cassida before Speaker Sexton, Speaker Sexton is terrified of debate. You know, if you feel strongly that your bills and your legislation is so lovely, why are you afraid to debate it on the House floor? I mean, we literally have the question called before any debate on a lot of bills, especially controversial bills, because there's not enough of us when we always object, of course. but we don't have enough to override that their calling of the question. And so bills are passed daily without any debate. And I have to say, if you are bringing legislation that you are afraid to debate on the House floor in front of the public, what are you doing? Because when I bring legislation, I'll debate it for a week. I'll stand up there a week long and talk about that legislation. I am not ashamed. And so why are they trying to push these things through? My seatmate, who is a Republican, he's the one who wore the Trump flag in the doors that was pictured a lot. He wore it as a cape onto the House floor. He's a lot of times he's on his phone and he's, doing his business while sitting on the House floor. He's always, let's get out of here. Let's stop asking questions. I'm going to call the questions. I've got to get back to work. I've got to make some money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Why don't you do your job?
Well, as I'm sure you recall, back in 2023, The Atlantic actually published a story, "Is Tennessee Still a Democracy?" Which, sounds provocative, but based on what you are describing in the way that your legislature functions, that doesn't sound like a democracy.
It's really not a democracy. And the more people that come down to see it or tune in to watch it are finding that out. I mean, you talk about Project 2025, as my colleague Rep. Justin Jones says, we're Project 2024. Everything in Project 2025, they tried out in Tennessee in advance and saw how far they could get. And that really is what is happening in Tennessee. We are the tip of the spear for the hate and the bigotry. I mean, we have Pete Hegseth's pastor in Jackson County creating a white county and trying to take over all the elected positions and trying to turn this into their little white supremacist haven. It's disgusting. But, Tennesseans are fighting back.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of local journalists like Phil Williams and Holly McCall have done great work on this growing white nationalist movement in Tennessee. It sounds like something, from bygone days, but talk to us about it, what it's like to live through this resurgence where you have people openly, spreading neo-Nazi ideas in your state.
It's horrific. And, they're downtown in Nashville. They're on the streets in Knoxville. It's so scary, that these people are out here and there's so much hate and so much violence that comes with everything they do. And it's like, people are like, well, why are they coming here? Listen to our legislature. Look at the bills that they are passing. They're inviting this hate to Tennessee. They're saying we are a safe place for you. And that's why I say there was one particular bill. It was when we were passing an anti-DEI bill. And I remember on the House floor, some of the men were standing up and waving their arms. And a lot of them have sticks that they punch their voting buttons with or whatever's historically been a thing, sort of got away from it. But I see they're standing there with their fists, waving these sticks in the air. And I literally tweeted, I feel like I'm at a Klan rally. I mean, because that's what it feels like. And then, like the other day after the vote on Thursday, and then when the Senate came out, and just to see my Black colleagues in tears, if it's happening to them, it's happening to all of us. It's not good for any of us. And so what people need to really understand is that this is what authoritarianism looks like in the 21st century. And it's not, you can't complete it without an absence of voting. And of course, the very first thing that they're going to do is take away the Black vote as much as possible. There's no question. And if it's not, what people have to understand is that if it's not working in the South, it's not working anywhere. And that you can't just we'll fix it over here and not fix the South. We have got to invest in the South. It's, we're barely one generation removed from cross burnings. It was not that long ago in Halls, part of Knoxville, where they burned a cross in a black family's yard. That's about a generation away. And people have to understand, if we want this multiracial, multi-generational democracy, which is what I think we all want, then we're going to have to invest in the South. We can't just leave the South behind.
Mm-hmm. Well, two of your colleagues from, the Tennessee 3, Representative Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, they were both expelled. They won their seats, in their special elections. But they have faced so much heat from your colleagues. I think we have at least one photo from, last week. This photo just conveys so much tension. Do you think that they have been targeted because they're young Black representatives who are outspoken and they're not afraid to use their voices? Have they been disproportionately targeted by your Republican colleagues over the last few years?
Absolutely. And I absolutely believe that they moved so quickly on this because Justin Pearson was challenging for that District 9 seat. Rep. Pearson scares them to death, and so does Rep. Jones. And it is these young, brilliant Black men that, let me tell you something about, in addition to being brilliant, here's something these two young Black men also know the Bible backwards and forwards better than any of my Christian Republican colleagues, and they can brutalize them with it on the House floor. And so they are so fearful of these young, bright men with far more knowledge than they could ever hope to have in their lifetimes. And I think that really the fact that Rep. Pearson was challenging in that District 9 seat really lit a fire under their butts.
Yeah. So that was the seat that was down in the Memphis area, which is a blue area of the state. It's a heavily African-American city. Nashville has a lot of Democrats. Knoxville, where you're at, does too. I know a lot of people have an idea that Tennessee is a red state, but you do have many Democratic voters. What are you hearing from your constituents about this new map that completely erases their voices?
Yeah, well, everybody I talk to is furious. And so my district, I've got a lot of Republicans. I've always been a fight. It's always been a fight in my district. As a matter of fact, the last year in 2021, they drew my block out of my precinct just to draw my house into the only other Democratic district in Knoxville. So thinking I would challenge the Democrat. Well, that's it's not quite a majority minority district, but it is approaching that. And there was no way I was going to run against one of our Black Democratic members. So I moved 6 blocks into a different district to run in that district. And I've been in this rental house for 3 years now, and the house that I own is just less than a mile away. But they don't like folks who speak out, and I am always speaking out, and they've done their dead level best to get rid of me, and it's not going to happen. I'll go on my terms, but try as they will, you know what? We are able to fight back. We can't write off the South. Tennesseans are fighters, and we're going to continue to fight this. I think that, people were so beat down last week, and we all were, and this is a horrible thing that they've done. But bless their hearts, they're not the sharpest knives in the drawer. And what they've done, potentially, is given us opportunity, because they drew these maps based on the 2024 numbers. Look back at 2018. And so what they've done in a midterm election is perhaps created more potential than they ever imagined for Democrats, especially at a time when this president is so unpopular, when grocery costs are higher than they've been in years, when Tennessee is seeing record electricity bills, utility bills are off the charts in Tennessee. I just paid $50 for a tank of gas. I've never paid that much for a tank of gas. It's been around $30, $35 for me. And so this idea that costs are going up and up and up, the people feel like these maps were not necessary. You know, the Republicans here in Tennessee tried to pretend that this lawsuit meant we had to redraw lines. It meant nothing of the sort. You know, there was no rush to redraw these lines.
Yeah.
There was nothing that said Memphis was drawn incorrectly.
Right.
They took advantage of something they thought they could get away with because they were very fearful that a very intelligent young Black man might become the congressman here, and that made them lose their minds. You should see them on the House floor when either Rep. Jones or Rep. Pearson speaks. It's really something to see how concerned they get, because these young men really hit an issue spot on.
Mm-hmm.
They really understand it. They understand the importance of fighting back. Like, if you notice on some of the things I said on the floor, you saw me say, call it racist. You saw me say white supremacy or white power. And none of my colleagues across the aisle said a word or interrupted. Just a couple minutes after I spoke, Rep. Jones used some of the same terminology. He was objected to, and they shut him down.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly showing racism.
Yeah.
You know, my white privilege, they didn't stop me from saying those things,
Right.
but they couldn't hear it from a young Black man.
So one thing that I've found interesting, you have your capital is in Nashville, the biggest city. It's a very cosmopolitan city. It's a blue city. There are lots of Fortune 500 companies everywhere. The state of Tennessee stays afloat because of the tax base of Nashville. And yet you have a very red legislature that is constantly trying to quell the dissent of the minority and steamroll everything. What is that dynamic like? Because literally the economic engine of Tennessee is right there in a blue city, and yet there may be absolutely no power for Democrats in the state after this latest gerrymandering. How does that work?
It's really outrageous. You're right. The money does come from Memphis. It comes from Nashville, but they're also constantly trying to take that over, trying to take over the Nashville airport, the Memphis and Knoxville and Nashville airports, trying to refuse dollars to these counties. It's really remarkable. You can tell that it drives them crazy because they're always trying to take over parts of Davidson County or Shelby County. And so what you have is our legislature, the supermajority, they're a bunch of bullies. I mean, you could just look at them as a bunch of white supremacist bullies. And they think that they know better, even though these cities, these blue cities, as they call them, are thriving, doing great. It's where people want to come, you know.
Right.
It is remarkable, but here they are tearing it down and saying how awful it is, but also trying to get the benefits of that revenue and everything. It's almost like watching a tennis match of their hypocrisy on the House floor, because they want to talk about small government while they're taking away every bit of local control. It truly is a tennis match of hypocrisy. They're for it this time. On the next bill, they're against it. You know, it could be one right back-to-back bills that they're claiming they need to control this, and then they're taking local control. They're also passing a lot of legislation that removes the average citizen's right to sue their government, making it next to impossible to sue the government about their unconstitutional legislation. It's really remarkable how insidious this is. And there's going to be a lot of work to undo it if we can take this democracy back and get it away from these authoritarians.
So I know there must be so much frustration from your constituents and others about not just this latest gerrymandering power grab, but moves to take away citizens' right to sue their own government, and the fact that any kind of sensible gun legislation has been stalled. What can citizens do? Because you have a supermajority.
Yeah.
You have a Republican governor. What can they do to fight back?
Well, and that's the thing. There are opportunities here. There was one seat. Now there's two potential seats. If we get our voters out, we have got to get voters out to vote. We've got to register them. We got to make sure who are they purging and how do we get them back. We need investment in the South to support and expand a burgeoning democracy movement that can turn back the authoritarian one. We have to meet the authoritarian movement where it seeks to advance locally, organizing with neighbors on the ground to demand more, not less participation. We're one of the lowest states with percentage of people voting, and we've given people a reason to show up, and we just got to help them get out and make sure that they get out, because our colleagues across the aisle are doing everything they can to take away that vote. But we need more participation, not less, and we need investment in the South. Southerners have led the way in challenging and overcoming movements of American authoritarianism before, defeating Jim Crow. Now authoritarian movements are setting up shop again in the South, and it's critical for Americans who believe in democracy to support what we're doing and support the Southerners pushing back, and not just say, oh, well, let's forget about them and go get more seats in Illinois. We've got to invest in the South and stop this where it grows. We know that Pulaski, Tennessee is where the Klan started, so it shouldn't be surprising what's happening here in Tennessee, but we can stop it. We have done it before.
I know that in 2024, you challenged U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn, a Republican, for the U.S. Senate, and I'm sure that was not an easy race. Running statewide in a red state never is. But are you seeing that there are more Democrats who are willing to run no matter how hard of a climb it is? Are you seeing that there's been an increase in candidates, not just at the federal level, but local and state as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And here in Knox County, we have, over the last couple of cycles, we've gradually flipping seats back to blue. Well, not back to blue. We haven't been blue, but we are getting blue. When I told you they drew my house out of my district, I moved into another district they didn't think I could win, and which is a crazy gerrymandered district, which goes from downtown all the way out west, and just a ridiculous district. And we were able to turn it blue all the way to that marker. So, you can keep messing with us, but we're not going to stop fighting back. And what we're going to do is surprise you. And instead of that one seat we had, take 2 or 3.
What are the biggest issues that you're hearing from Tennesseans as they are looking at the midterm elections?
Well, of course, we're looking at affordability. Like I said, we have a 10% sales tax on groceries in Tennessee.
Really?
Yeah.
In a lot of states, groceries aren't taxed at all.
Right. And so Democrats have had bills to remove at least the state portion of that sales tax. And of course, Republicans kill it every time. And this last one, Rep. Bain brought this legislation. She also created a way to pay for it, where it's not costing the state. We're taxing billion-dollar corporations in order to pay for the sales tax coming off the groceries. and they've killed it every year. I brought legislation to raise the wage. We're still at a $7.25 minimum wage in Tennessee. So more than 50% of Tennessee families are one car problem away from being devastated. And so, and now they've had their SNAP benefits cut. They've had Medicaid cut. We're a state that did not expand Medicaid. We've got the second number of hospital closures. In a state that has completely outlawed abortion, there's really the only exception is a molar pregnancy or an ectopic pregnancy, which will never become a live fetus anyway. So we really don't have any exceptions. And we have more than 50% of the state with no OBGYN and no place to deliver. So we're forcing 10-year-olds to carry a pregnancy, and they may be an hour and a half away from a hospital.
That's incredible to hear. I know that obviously the implications for democracy for this new legislation with the new congressional and state legislative maps is horrific. But also in that speech that we played, you hit on the fact that there's a tremendous cost, especially for local governments, when you're changing the rules, midway through an election, and you have to throw out ballots and reprint them, and they're changing polling locations. All of that is a logistical nightmare, and it's also really expensive. How are communities going to be able to pay for this as you're talking about this affordability crisis?
And that's what we tried to talk about in the committees and on the floor, because it's an unfunded mandate. You're telling counties to pay. There's no fiscal note in the budget with this thing. It's hard to pass something if it's got a fiscal note. So they just drop all the costs down to the county and then say it doesn't cost us anything. It's going to cost people a lot. It's going to cost a lot in just creating chaos in an election. But you think about, we went back to cost the taxpayers more money and to throw chaos into the 2026 election. We're 51st in the nation in funding our kids per pupil, student funding for public education. Dead last. We were 47th, and this year we became 51st.
Wow.
And just passed vouchers. We could have had a special session to fund our public schools, but that's not what they did. Instead, they had a special session to upend our elections and to cost our counties more money in those elections by trying desperately to keep their power.
Representative, what can some of our viewers who aren't in Tennessee, what can they do to support you and to support democracy in states like Tennessee?
Well, they can do it by supporting Democratic candidates as they run, donate to their campaigns, that sort of thing. But also support the organizations that are doing the work and organizing and registering voters. We've got Equity Alliance, NAACP, Forward Tennessee, and Civic Tennessee. All of these organizations are doing the work to keep our democracy. And so support those organizations that are out there doing the work, support the candidates that are doing the work, because this is a wonderful state to live in. People are constantly telling me, well, move to California, move here. I love this state. This is my home state. I want to stay here, but I also want this to be a multiracial, multi-generational coalition. And, some of my older colleagues think, well, if it was just like it was, if we had it back like it was 20 years ago. No, what we had 20 years ago didn't work for Black people. It didn't work for brown people. It didn't work for women. We need something going forward. As my colleague Rep. Jones says, the South will rise anew.
And I see the photo before you, that iconic photo of the three of you. When was that exactly taken? Was that back in 2023?
Yeah, it was. It was taken in Memphis when Rep. Pearson there was a county commission vote to reinstate him. and there was a huge march down the main street to the courthouse, and that was along the way. He stopped to address the crowd, and that's what that was. And it's funny because a friend of mine got it she said she purchased it in an art gallery in New Mexico. And I was like, wow.
Well, see, people are concerned about what happens in Tennessee all over the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Representative, thank you for coming and talking with us at such a crucial time for your state. I hope that we can keep in touch with you as we see the developments in what's going on in the courts. And thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you all for talking about it, because, until people see it, I think that was the thing with the Tennessee 3 is when people, they hear about the South. But when you actually see what is happening in our state house, it really puts a exclamation point on it for folks. And so it makes them want to get involved. I had talked to so many people who like, well, we're in California, everything's fine, so we want to donate money in your state, to help Tennessee. And so that's what we've got to do. We've got to help each other out. I remember when I first got involved in politics, it was the Obama campaign. And I went to North Carolina to knock on doors, and I went to Pennsylvania to register voters, and all the things. We've got to help where we can. So don't write off the South. We will rise anew.
Thank you so much, Representative.